Imagine it's Tuesday, 2 p.m. You're staring at your phone screen, or perhaps a pile of unwashed dishes, which is starting to feel like a physical burden. You have the time. You have the tools. You might even have a caffeine fix. But your body feels like it's made of lead, and your brain now finds the structural integrity of the blinds next to you more exciting than the task that actually matters. You tell yourself you're being lazy. You tell yourself you're failing. But what if this paralysis wasn't a character flaw? What if this heavy, stagnant feeling was actually your brain trying to solve a math problem you didn't even know you had? We tend to think of laziness as a vacuum, a lack of will. We see it as a no where there should be a yes, but in the quiet world of behavioral psychology, laziness doesn't really exist. What we call laziness is usually just a very intense, very internal tug-of-war. It's a conflict between your expectations for the future and your brain's immediate need for security. You're fine. Your mind is just working on a very specific equation, and right now the variables are weighted in such a way that standing still seems like the only logical choice. Think about the last time you had a big project. Maybe it was a work assignment, or maybe it was just the idea of finally organizing that one closet. When you look at that task, your brain immediately asks a question. What is the likelihood that I will actually succeed at this? This is what psychologists call expectancy. If you've struggled with this task before, or if the finish line feels blurry, your expectancy drops. And when expectancy is low, your brain treats the task like a bad investment. Why would your nervous system burn precious glucose on something that might not even pay off? It's not that you don't want to do it. It's that your brain is a biological accountant and it's trying to protect you from bankruptcy. This protective instinct often shows up as a strange kind of overstimulation. You might find yourself scrolling through social media, not because you're enjoying it, but because the big task feels so loud and demanding that you need a way to turn down the volume. The scrolling is a mute button. It's a way of regulating a nervous system that feels suddenly exposed. We call it putting things off, but it's actually an act of emotional nesting. You are retreating to a space where the stakes are zero, because the space where the stakes are high feels like a threat to your identity. Imagine a student who has all the talent in the world but waits until 4 a.m. to start an essay. On the surface, it looks like poor planning. But psychologically, it's a brilliant defense mechanism. If they start 2 weeks early and do a mediocre job, it means they aren't as smart as they thought they were. That is a devastating blow to the ego. But if they start at 4:00 a.m. and do a mediocre job, well, that's just because they ran out of time. The laziness isn't an avoidance of work, it's an avoidance of judgment. It's a way to keep the dream of your own potential safe from the cold reality of effort. It's a shield, not a weakness. But here's the part nobody tells you. The brain has one more trick here, and it's centered around the concept of delay. Our minds are evolutionarily hardwired to prioritize the now over the later. To your ancient, survival-focused brain, a reward that is 3 weeks away might as well be on another planet. When we feel lazy, it's often because the gap between the effort and the payoff is too wide for our neurotransmitters to bridge. We aren't being impulsive because we are reckless. We are being impulsive because, in the history of our species, the bird in the hand has always been worth more than two in the bush. Your brain is just being a good survivalist in a world that now demands long-term spreadsheets. As we move through different stages of life, this relationship with laziness shifts. When you're younger, laziness feels like a rebellion, a way to reclaim time from authority. In your middle years, it often transforms into a form of burnout, where the laziness is actually a silent protest from a body that has been asked to carry too much for too long. By the time we reach later chapters of life, we often look back and realize that the periods we called lazy were actually seasons of transition. They were the pauses between the notes. The brain wasn't stopping, it was recalibrating. The way we interpret this behavior changes as we age, but the core function remains the same: emotional regulation. When life feels chaotic, when the world feels unpredictable, doing nothing becomes a way to restore a sense of control. If you don't start the task, you can't fail at the task. If you don't engage, you can't be hurt. In this light, laziness is a familiar room with the door locked. It's a heavy blanket on a cold day. It's an anchor that keeps you from drifting into the open sea of uncertainty. We often treat our lack of motivation like a fire that needs to be put out with the cold water of discipline. We tell ourselves to just do it, as if the brain were a simple machine with a power switch. But your mind is more like a garden. If nothing is growing, it's usually not because the plants are lazy. It's because the soil is dry, or the sun is too harsh, or the fence is broken. The stagnation is a symptom of the environment, not a flaw in the seed. There's a quiet dignity in recognizing that your brain is always on your side, even when it's frustrating you. When you find yourself sitting on the couch, unable to move, staring at the phone, try to remember that this is your system's way of seeking safety. It's your autopilot taking over because it senses that the manual controls are becoming too heavy to hold. It is a biological response to a perceived overwhelm, a way of narrowing your world down to a size that feels manageable. You don't need to be hacked. You don't need to be fixed. The pressure to be constantly productive is a modern invention, but the human need for rest and the human fear of failure are as old as time. When you strip away the shame and the societal expectations, what is left is just a person trying to navigate a complex world with a brain that is doing its best to keep them safe. It is okay to be still. It is okay if your output doesn't match your ambition today. The sun still sets, the earth still turns, and your value as a human being is not a variable in any equation. You are allowed to exist in the pauses. You are allowed to be a work in progress. And sometimes the most productive thing you can do is simply acknowledge that being human is heavy work, and it's all right to put the weight down for a while. You are not lazy. You are just here, and for now, that is more than enough.